Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome out to tonight's weekly member training. I'm Ferre here with Swenson, and we're happy to be here.
Yeah, excited. It's a brand new year. We hope everyone had a great holiday, and I think it's a great year to be a tax sale investor. I don't think I've been this excited with tax sale investing in quite a few years.
No, there's a sense that I think this coming year is going to be a fantastic year. The nice thing about the new year every year is you get a chance to decide what you want to do for the following 12 months. And, I don't know about you. Sometimes I look at my past years and I feel like I accomplished things. In other years, I look at it and I feel like I didn't. And I want this year to be a year where I accomplish some of my goals. I want it to be a year where many of you accomplish your goals as well. And so we wanted to talk about that a little bit as we open up here tonight. We're going to ultimately talk about some news and announcements. We're going to talk about some steps to getting started right, essentially, because I think it's such a problem that people run into. It's easy to get lost or off course. And so we're going to dive into each one of those with details. But to talk for just a moment about the new year, and I think the opportunity that we've got, really time-wise, there's never been a better time to get involved. There's never been more sales available, and they've never been easier to get engaged with. So it's an excellent time to get involved because tax sale investing is still as confusing as it was years ago. But there is some competition, but it's nothing like it could be with any other industry. It's still fairly wide open compared to most industries out there.
Yeah. You actually made a pretty good point of talking about our goals. And what's unique is our goals, many of them are going to revolve around your goals and our members' goals, and helping so many members do deals and so many members be successful and create success stories. And so, our goals are when we accomplish our goals, that means you're accomplishing your goals.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, just so everybody knows, the mentoring program is something that's evolving all the time, and it's always improving, it's growing, and I think what it's becoming is quite fascinating. It's becoming an opportunity to work with each of you, work with different individuals over a long period of time, and to be able to take you through the process of both buying and investing. I think the reality of it is, it's a longer process. We'll talk more about that too later on here. But when it comes to getting help through a process, it's not the kind of thing that you can get help with for a couple of weeks and suddenly you're done. If you're the type of person that would like some additional help doing this, it's something that you want to get help with pretty much every week.
Yeah, and every investor has different levels of training and understanding when it comes to real estate. And so we'll have members that are able to just become members, join the membership either on a month-to-month basis or purchase a year up front. And essentially, they've already done this, they have some experience. And so essentially they're just using our services to go out there and help them do deals and make the process easier for them. We also have other investors that maybe haven't done any type of investing or very little, or have never done tax sale investing and are overwhelmed. And that's really where working with us personally on a weekly basis is we go over assignments, buy property, go through, just really take through that whole process is the way that others learn. And so if there's investors, members that are interested in that, that's definitely something that we have. And it's so affordable compared to other coaching programs on the market.
Yeah, in fact, I was just going to say, if you think you can't afford it, chances are you probably could. Just because, again, for us, it's more about being able to work with the individual, and we get down to the nuts and bolts of it, where basically we help walk you through the process here of what we're looking for, what to buy, and then what to do with it after you buy. As in terms of getting it ready, selling it, whatever that process might be. But what I want everybody just to think about is the new year's already upon us. I think that a lot of you have probably been interested in tax sales for a long time. And what I would encourage you to do is just make this year, make 2018 the year that you start investing into tax liens, or you start investing into tax deeds, and make this a turning point, because it's like anything else. It takes time to build up momentum with it and to get everything working. But once it does, it becomes a giant cash machine. But the only way you can do it is by making that first investment and by taking that first step. And so there's never been a better time.
Yeah, I mean, really, that's all of the training in the world is not going to help someone if they're not willing to take that first step. And once you've gone through that first step, the second step, the third step, doing it over and over is so much easier because you've already gone through the process. That's the reason we always say, just go out there and buy a lien, buy a deed, go through the process, because going through that process is going to be a hands-on educational experience.
Yeah, and the only way you can really gain that knowledge is by going through the experience. And so, it doesn't do you any justice to hold off or wait, because there's so much you can learn there just by going through the experience. And so, set some goals and take action with it. Taking action always makes you feel better. And, we would like to be able to help you do that. We'd like to be able to help you take action this year. But for everybody that's on here tonight, let's talk about taking action now. Let's talk about how you get started. Let's make sure that everybody's on, firm playing ground here, because a lot of times we work with people that are at all different levels of knowledge and experience, and sometimes we talk with people that that are well versed in all things tax sale related, and so we can just talk away with them, and we forget sometimes that there are a lot of you that are just getting into this for the first time, or that are new members even. And even if you're not a new member, if you haven't gone through these specific steps, I think it's beneficial to do it anyway.
Oh, absolutely.
So we have 6 steps listed here for getting started right. And we say getting started right because if you really skip any of these steps, it'll end up throwing you off and will make it more difficult to get started. Okay. These are the steps you go through to ensure that you have all of the knowledge that you need going into the buying process. In other words, you want to gain as much book knowledge as you can before you start the experiential side of things, so that you can understand what's happening. And so the way that this all begins, the first thing we tell members to do is to just utilize the resources that are available to you. And it's really more than most people realize. The first thing you want to do as a new member is download the home study program. I'm guessing everybody here has done this, but if you haven't done this, we're going to talk about that real quickly here. It's simple to do. You've got the training center on the website with that pop down, and the second one down, we've got course library there. And the course library is going to have all of the materials that you can use as a resource for learning. Now, this is basically a tax sale program. It's the original program that Steve and I wrote for tax sale investing. So it really is kind of it's the culmination of everything that we kind of figured out about tax sales back then, along with everything we've learned now.
Yeah, really, I think that even us, I blame ourselves a little bit for not focus on and talking about it enough, because really the home study course, when we were working with the seminar companies, we would, instead of doing a PDF, we would put that in book form, but they would sell for $2,000 to $4,000. And, we had 99% of our students stayed within our program because they felt that the materials were worth it. And so it will really break down tax sale investing, and it's going to teach you the nuts and bolts that you need to understand. And it's really only going to take, a number of hours to go through. It's not a hard read. It's easy to understand. And it really goes down and breaks down tax sale investing. It's kind of what set us apart and made us kind of a buzz in the industry when we created this.
Yeah, well, a lot of things that we did with it are unique. And I think to fully grasp how we see a lot of things, it really helps to read a couple of the manuals here. And like Steve said, it doesn't take too long, but we've got the workshop manual and the quick start guide. The workshop manual serves as kind of the nuts and bolts of how tax liens and tax deeds work. The quick start guide has a number of other things in it, like setting up a new business, new business entity for it, or deciding what your investor profile is. And this is a big part here of why we have you go through these steps when you're getting started. And that's because as you read through the manuals, you're going to get a sense, or maybe through the training also, you get a sense of what you're looking for in an investment. And what the investor profiles are meant to do are to help you identify what it is you want out of the investment, and to couple that with an investment strategy that will help you accomplish your goals. So it's really something there to help you determine what kind of an investor you are, and even further from there, where you can invest.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a pretty good description. I mean, really, the workshop manual is going to be the meats and potatoes of the training. It's going to go over all the basics of tax sale investing and explain how it's done through the bidding systems, online auctions, redemption periods, and the quick start guide is set up to help you get your business going. So we talk about different business strategies, and like Shade said, those investor profiles help an investor narrow down 50 states to a limited number of states, maybe 5 or 10 states within that investor profile. And then from there, they can review the state guides and get started. So what it does is it's able to really funnel you down until you're able to determine exactly how you'd like to invest.
Yeah, in fact, it's incredibly confusing when you're starting off here with tax sale investing. I think there's a lot of information to take in, and really going through these manuals and selecting a profile and knowing what type of investor you are and the states where you can utilize that strategy, it goes a long ways in helping clear up the picture about what you want to do with the rest of the United States, where you want to invest. So if you haven't read those manuals yet, read through them, decide what kind of investor you are, which profile seems to fit you best, and use that as the stepping point for the next part in the process. So by the way, this is kind of, I think, something we really brought about early on here, but just the difference between the book knowledge and the experience knowledge, and how you've got to get both sides of it. And the manuals we have are really what you need in order to pick up, I think, the vast majority of the book knowledge that's required here. The experienced knowledge is something that you have to do at the location you're investing in, and it will change every time you move to a different location, but it takes a combination of both of these in order to make good investments. You can't have just one without the other, or you're going to make mistakes. And so it's important to make sure that you've got both sides of it. Once you feel like your book knowledge is down, then the experienced knowledge will be cake. That will be just what you learn about working with different counties.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And that experience knowledge needs to be done by you. So, we're going to be able to provide you with the training, but actually going through and doing research or participating in the auction, that's going to be you doing it, going through that process.
Yeah, and you learn every time. It's not just when you're trying to buy something directly from a county, but every time you go on a county website where you've got to search out information, where you have to locate records, you're going to learn a lot about it. Now, the tax sale program is not the only training resource that you've got access to. Of course, we do the weekly webinars. We've got a video library, and you've got access to anything else that we produce here on the site, which we're actually in the process of creating and producing some new videos that we'll let you guys know about to help answer questions and to basically to help you with your trade.
And in addition to our home study program, we also have a 3-course real estate program as well that goes over all aspects of real estate investing. And so downloading that book can be a good resource if you're looking to go back and look at different selling strategies or different real estate information or terms. Those are going to be good books as well that are completely free to you.
Yeah, it's already included with the membership, so there's no point in not downloading the materials and in using them. It's not going to cost you any more. Now, we kind of talked about this here. Once you've got that figured out, the investor profiles, in fact, really, I should have been going over these slides probably when we did it, but this is what it looks like when you start into the investor profiles. But what you're going to find is that there are many different profiles, and they're basically divided into tax liens, tax deeds, and redemption deeds. And then from there, they're further divided into the buying method that is required in order to purchase them. So whether that's live auction, online auction, or over the counter. So That's how the types of investors are set up. But the idea with it is this: once you know specifically what type of investor you are, or what you're mostly interested in doing, it allows you to narrow down that focus. It allows you to eliminate states that are not going to work and zero in on the states that will work. And this is important as it moves to the next step in the process, because this is where a person can get really confused and really lost when you're trying to start to narrow that down and figure out where in the world am I going to start with so many different, with thousands of different counties and municipalities. When you get to that point, you really have to have a pretty solid idea of what you want to accomplish to not be confused.
Yeah, exactly. And a good point to bring up is that resource assessment. That's going to help you determine your investor profile. We're going to go over, how much time is involved with each type of investment strategy, and also it helps you determine exactly what you're working with, which in turn is going to help you determine which investor profile is going to work best for you. And then from there, that's going to help you pick the best dates to get started.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Resources can also mean, for the resource assessment, it can also mean how much capital you're working with, because that can change your strategy dramatically in terms of what you're trying to do and what you're working with. The way that you would approach investing if you were just looking to earn high interest rate returns on tax liens would be completely different than the way that you would approach it if you have $5,000 in the bank and you want to try to turn it into something, a lot more. Those require much different approaches for executing. And so it's important to have an idea going into it of what it is you want to do. If time is of the essence, in other words, if you're trying to build up capital in a short amount of time, time is essentially the enemy for you. And what that means is that you're going to want to deal with tax deeds, because you're looking for something that you can basically buy and turn around and sell in the shortest time possible. And tax deeds are the only vehicle that are going to give you that immediate power to sell as soon as the deed has been recorded. So tax deeds will always have that advantage of giving you the power to buy something at one price and sell it for a higher price, and having that be real estate. But I guess not everybody wants that. Some people are looking for a safe investment and a high interest rate return.
Yeah, that's what I love about tax sale investing. If you're looking from the interest rate standard, a tax lien certificate is going to be definitely more safe, and 99% of the time higher earning than any other type of stock or bond or anything you could purchase. So it's going to be safer and higher interest earning. So if you're talking about trying to earn interest off your money, there's really no better resource. And then we're talking about tax deeds. We're really just talking about real estate, but buying real estate at a fraction of its value. And so when you're looking at it, it's really, tax sale investing to me is the very best investment strategy that's completely, that's available, because you have the option to buy real estate and invest in real estate at the cheapest possible price. Plus you have the opportunity to take some of that money and put it in tax lien certificates that is backed by real estate and earning a guaranteed return.
Yeah, it's a good point. And in the past, the only thing that really separated what types of investments there were was where you were investing at. And where travel used to be a major obstacle for counties, now that we've got the internet and online records, all those boundaries have disappeared. And so really it just means that you've got so many different places where you can invest for different outcomes, and there's really something to fit every investor. So once you get to this point where you figured out what your investor profile is and you're ready to get started, you should have a list of states where your investment strategy should potentially work. Okay, but that may not necessarily be the best way to go about trying to figure out where to get a list, because that's really the next step here in the process. Is once you know what it is you're after, once you know what type of investor you are, then the next thing you want to do is either locate a tax sale list or locate a tax sale that's coming up. You want to find an opportunity where you can begin to search through a list of potential properties so that you can do due diligence. So you can begin to narrow down your selection, try to figure out which ones of those you're interested in.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, if we're looking at, let's say you decide you want to be an over-the-counter tax deed investor, there's going to be a number of different states that you can potentially invest in. And by going and seeing what is currently available, on the over-the-counter list, that may help you decide, well, it looks like Pennsylvania has quite a few lists, but, Minnesota has less. And so maybe I'm going to do it in Pennsylvania because there's more lists. It can, looking what the inventory that we have through our over-the-counters and through our online auctions and through our auction calendar, that can also help you decide to choose a state. So maybe you want to invest in tax deeds, but Kansas auction isn't until until the middle of the summer. So right now you want to look for a tax deed auction that you can participate in that's between now and
then. Yeah. In fact, really it leads us right into this point, which is when you are going to search for a tax sale list, there's really two different types of searches that you can do for tax sale lists, okay? You can either do an opportunity-based search, okay, which is where you're trying to figure out which opportunities are coming up now. It's all about what's available now, or what is coming up here soon. It's all about thinking what you can find and what might work out, okay? So this one is more, it's a strategy that can maybe jump you around here in the beginning to a lot of different places because you don't necessarily know where you want to invest yet long term. You just know that you want to get started, okay? And if that's the case, there's lots of places that you can do that. You don't have to put down roots in any one specific place here in the beginning if you're just trying to get started and you just want to start making money. If that's the case, that's easier to do than the second option, which is location-based searching. And location-based searching when it comes to tax sale lists is where you know exactly where you want to invest or the region or area, and what you have to do from that point is stay on top of their tax sale lists. So you've got to be participating in the sale when it comes up, or maybe they've got an over-the-counter list that you can, that you can deal with. But if they don't, then you're somewhat limited by what they have available, and so you may not see the opportunities right away that you would with opportunity-based searches.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So this will be one of the things that you're going to do here is you're looking at the different lists. And like Steve mentioned before, the strategy that you're employing will make a big difference on maybe the way you'll look for lists. Like he mentioned, if over-the-counter lists are what you're after, then you'll most certainly gravitate to states that offer more over-the-counter opportunities. Whereas other states that don't have over-the-counter opportunities are not going to work. So, when you're looking for that, really, let's say you're a deed investor and you want to buy deeds and you're basically open to the way that you can buy. Well, that is more along the lines of an opportunity-based search because you can say, look, I know that I want deeds, but aside from that, I'm not picky about where, and I'm not even picky about how I buy them. I could get these over the counter, or I could get these through an online auction, or maybe even you can attend some live auction somewhere. Whatever it is, you're going to find opportunities to buy faster there with an opportunity-based search than you generally will with location-based searches. Location-based searches, though, are great in some cases. If you're bird dogging for somebody, or if you want to invest in a certain area, or if you've already got real estate.
That location.
Yeah, if you live in that location, or if you've already got real estate in a certain location, those are all great reasons to do location-based, investing. But if you're not quite to that point yet, then don't let yourself wait just because you don't know where to do it at yet. Because the reality of it is, where is not nearly as important as how much you're paying for it. And when you can buy real estate for a low enough price, I think there's opportunity all over the country.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Now, beyond that, as you look at the tax list, and depending on how much time you've had to spend looking at the website, you'll find that tax sale lists are all separated and organized according to first off the type, whether we're dealing with tax liens, tax deeds, or even redemption deeds for secondary liens, like we've got there. Or it'll also come down to the selling method, that's being used, whether it's online auction or whether it's over the counter or something like that.
Yeah, and one thing I quickly want to add is when you're looking at these different states, either you're doing an opportunity-based search or a location-based search, the state guides can help you get some of that information that you need to know, like when is the auctions. So you see, oh, the auctions are usually held this time of year. Or, do they offer over-the-counters, or any of that kind of information is included in the state guides, which you can either get by downloading them, and we also have them on the website as well. So that's something you could do if you're trying to choose through a couple of states. You can review those state guides, and it'll help you pick which one's going to be the best state.
Yeah, which, by the way, if anybody has not really done it before, it's a good idea here. It's a good idea here. You can just go down here into the profile center here on the website, and we have the state profiles and the investor profiles listed here along with the map. So if you wanted to just look at the investor profiles, you could look at the different investor profiles here and go through each one of them, or you could also go through the states. And like we were saying with the states, if you're new to a certain state, investing in a state, it's worth the time to pull up one of our breakdowns of how the state works, because it will give you an overview of how the state operates based on its state laws. When Steve and I were trying to figure out how to do these state overviews, we really, it was also new to us that the only thing that really made sense was to try to pull up the state tax laws and to try to interpret them the best we could there based on things that it said. So it was based on the actual laws and the way that they're written out. And so a lot of times that will include details about everything, from time frames that you have to deal with to specific rates,
bidding methods.
Yeah, bidding methods that are required by law, the legal requirements for foreclosure with the county. Really, just reading the state laws for the states was something that taught us a lot. That, because you saw what the differences were between how certain states operated, and you could see the difference between tax lien states and tax deed states and the way that their laws were written and how they use the different terms. So yeah, anyhow, if you want to do any kind of research into a state, all you need to do is just click on the state. It'll pull up an overview of how the state operates there, and you can get a pretty good idea of.
You can see this, tips, the taxing authority. So if you need to talk to a tax collector or the treasurer, they call it a certain term within there that you're going to need to contact. All that information.
Yeah, in fact, chances are, if you're dealing with a new state, they may not even call them tax liens or tax deeds. They may not have the same terminology as what we're using. They may have terminology that's completely unique to their county, or possibly, that state. We run into that kind of thing all the time. Or counties that have different sets of procedures. For instance, after you buy a tax deed and what they issue to you, that can vary. In some places you get a quitclaim deed, in some places you get something closer to a, what do they call it? It's like a deed.
Tax deed, or
yeah, it's kind of like a deed. Anyhow, but you actually have to change it.
Commissioner's deed.
Yeah, like a commissioner's deed, which you need to get switched over to a quitclaim deed in order to sell it.
Even there you can look at the rate of return, and we talk about how Illinois is paying out. Just good information.
Yeah. So it's a really good place to begin here. Now, once you're able to locate a list, this fifth step we've got listed here is really it's more than one step in a way. It's more of an idea of what you want to start to build. But the idea here is to begin building your pipeline. Okay, and what we mean by that is that there is a process that is involved when you go to get started. Okay, so when you want to start attending sales and performing research, the reality of it is it's probably going to take longer than what you anticipate. Okay, and in other words, if you have it in your mind, you want to get these deals done in like less than 30 days, in a lot of cases it's just not going to be possible, because from the time you pay for the tax deed or make an offer, it could be 30 to 60 days or even more, maybe in some counties, before a deed is recorded in your name, and it could be longer before you're able to sell it. You know, it'll be things specific to the county. It could be less in some cases, but you never really know exactly how long it's going to take, and it's going to vary based on where you're at. So consider this. It takes 30 to 60 days, let's say, from the time you put in an offer until you can actually get some kind of response back, get the deed back. And let's say that it takes another 30 days to get everything else handled there. So you could be looking at 2 to 3 months from the time that you decide to buy the property until you actually have it in your hands. Well, that would be a problem if you're looking to buy that property and then get a hold of it and then sell it before you buy anything else. That's going to put a major roadblock in your way here, because you've got to wait out this time period. And what we want you to do is begin building up a pipeline, because what you want to do is you want to start getting these properties so that they're dropping in all the time, you know, so that you're bidding on properties on a regular basis. Because as you're bidding on properties on a regular basis and that time starts to move up, you can begin to sell the properties as well. You know, if you're constantly buying, then you're going to have a steady flow of properties coming in that you can then turn around and sell, you know, as it makes its way a little further down the timeline here.
Yeah, and this timeline really is going to be tax deeds.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, unless you're looking at a tax lien that you're doing the foreclosure on, and probably be a little bit different. But you know, really, what we're looking about here is buying and selling property.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to tax liens, the general rule there is that if you're earning a high interest rate return, you want to earn that for as long as you possibly can. So long-term investments are not really an issue. They're kind of the whole point when you're buying tax liens, is to have that long-term investment that's earning a high interest rate return. But yeah, if you're looking to buy tax deeds though, and you want to start selling tax deeds, then you have to start building up a pipeline, you know, unless you're just trying to do a one-off. But if you're trying to get the ball rolling with something here, then you want to start buying them on a consistent basis. And, you know, we're talking about, in other words, if you were to start at least buying one every month, okay? So if you're buying one every month here in the beginning, then, you know, as you get into your second and third month, depending on the county, they could have this up to you at that point. You know, within that first couple months here, you'll start to receive the deeds, you know, that you purchased. And, you know, then as you're buying, you're also going through the process of monetizing the investment. You know, so as soon as you have the opportunity and ability, you're executing your exit strategy. And you're doing that at the same time that you're also buying properties. You know, you need to be doing both of them at the same time, I think, if you really want to try to make money with it. Otherwise, it just takes too long.
Yeah, well, this is definitely the strategy you want to implement if you're looking at generating your income. If you're looking to replace your income or increase your income, or you know, this is the strategy to do it, because you know, it's going to give you the opportunity to constantly be buying property. And then as you start getting those properties in, you're going to be constantly selling as you're buying. Mm-hmm.
You know, something else just to take note of here too is that in some counties, they have a price posted there, and that price is the price you pay. In other counties, they will accept offers, okay? And so you send in offers for different amounts, and they will either accept or reject your offer. But the ability to make offers when you're dealing with counties changes up things quite a bit too, because then you're not dealing with the same amount of cash going out. You know, you can be dealing with a fraction of it. So, you know, whereas you think you might need to pay $2,000 for something, you could make an offer for 10% of that and see what they say. And maybe they deny it, you know, maybe they accept it. But either way, you know, you're not often forced to pay, well, at least in some counties you may be. But in a lot of counties, you're not forced to pay the amount they have listed there that's owed.
Yeah, like Pennsylvania would be a good example. You know, if you were looking at their over-the-counters, you submit an offer on one of those properties, this offer has to go within the 3 tax districts, the county, and so it takes some time. You know, it's going to take 30 to 60 days, like Shay talked about, them to kind of determine that. But if they accept the offer, then at that time you're going to be required to pay. And if they don't, then it's not a big deal.
Yeah, yeah. And that's a nice system in a way, because you can make the offer and they can accept it without you actually sending in the money yet.
Yeah, exactly.
And
not every state's like that.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll have to send in the money, but in those type of states, that gives you an opportunity where maybe you could purchase one where you have to pay it outright, but you could do an offer on one where maybe you'll have the money in a month or two.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's all about the timing. And something else that that kind of goes unsaid here is reinvesting in the same places over and over again. That's a huge part of being successful with this. Is when you gain that experience-based knowledge, that is highly specialized knowledge that you have, because it's not knowledge for the entire country. It's knowledge for one specific county, at one specific place. And so it will save you an immense amount of time if you can reinvest in that same place instead of trying to learn all new systems, especially if you find a county that offers you some pretty good opportunities.
Oh yeah, I mean, it just makes sense to keep going back, and if you've already gone through the system, if it makes sense, if you understand it, and if you're selling property. We have a couple of counties that me and Shane almost look like our little honey hole, which we just plan on continuing to invest because we have other properties that we want to purchase there. And so as long as we continue, and as long as the properties are selling, we're going to continue buying within that county.
Yeah, yeah, and at the prices you can pick up properties for, that's our true advantage there, is in our prices. That's what nobody can touch. Okay, so as you get the list, you're reading lists here. Obviously, between the point where you get access to the list and you buy, there's a lot of stuff that happens there. Okay, and there are, really, that's where the due diligence is occurring. But there's a lot of things that go into that process. But the truth of it is, it's simpler than most people imagine.
Yeah.
I think that most people, when they're thinking about due diligence, it's always something in their head more than what it probably is.
Yeah.
Because, I think there's always this need to find more. But the reality is that we're going to use the tax sale lists to gather our initial bit of information on the property. Okay, so what's important to remember here in the beginning is that time is your most valuable resource, and that it's really easy to waste a lot of time on dumb stuff. So you have to be careful about the way that you spend your time as you're going through tax sale lists. You need to look for ways to be more effective. You don't want to get hung up on properties for too long that are wasting your time because you can't get the information. If you run into something like that, you can skip it and come back. The main idea though is to keep your effective work rolling, to get stuff done. It's doing things like if there's too much time before the sale, not wasting a lot of time doing research there, maybe just trying to scan through the list and narrow your selection down a little bit, but not spending hours and hours looking at properties that may very well redeem.
Yeah, you don't want to go through a property list of 400 properties and research every property a month before the list, because 100 of those properties may be gone. So you've spent a lot of time doing it. I think that's a good point, is to, as soon as it's feasible for you to get the research done in time before the auction, do it. So usually, we're going to start doing further, start the real due diligence process about a week before the sale.
Yeah.
Even though that's a short period of time, we don't want to spend time doing serious due diligence. And if we're going to have somebody go out to the property, we're going to have that, essentially the day or two before the sale, we're going to set that up so that they're going to be, we're only paying for properties that we have a high chance of going to the sale.
Yeah, I mean, consider that and think about that as the redemption period is coming up to an end, as the tax sale date draws closer for tax deed properties, that the parties that own that property are in the process of losing their ownership rights to it. So you're going to have a high percentage of them that are going to figure out some way to scramble at the last second to pay off what's owed. And, that happens in different percentages, throughout the country, but the vast majority of delinquent taxes end up redeeming. Okay, so When you're looking at a list, you know, if I see a list that still has 90% plus of its properties there, I'm suspicious. Okay, and that's because I know the list is not whittled down enough given what's going to end up redeeming. And so I don't know exactly what on that list is legitimately going to be available versus what hasn't just been updated yet.
And that's actually brings up something that I just thought about. When you're looking at a tax sale list, let's say you download a list that we put up on the website a month before the auction happens. If you plan on investing in that county, you're going to want to go get that brand new list from the county because they may update it daily or weekly. But if they're updating it daily, then you're going to know, okay, as of today, these properties are gone off the list and these ones are still available.
Yeah.
So you don't want to spend time researching an old list. You always want the most updated list from the county.
Yeah, in fact, if you're looking at an upcoming sale, it becomes crucial, you know, that your list is accurate. And some counties are really good about keeping their lists updated throughout the process there so that you're not wasting a lot of time. But, you know, that's a good way to save a lot of time here in the beginning. Also, in the beginning, you want a lot of your due diligence at the beginning is somewhat superficial. You know, it's going to be based on things that you can look at and go through quickly, like a bid to value ratio, things like that. It's not going to be diving into it deeply because you're still not sure if these properties are all going to be available. Okay, so when you're trying to narrow down your selection, you know, we talked about quick glance before and kind of how to read lists. But what it really comes down to is to take the information you've got available to you, which oftentimes we'll use the amount because it's what makes the most sense. It's reflective of value, and you know, so it means something. And people always have a budget, and so you know they're going to need to account for that budget anyway. So in other words, you know, we'll use the amount to help narrow down our selection, weed out the properties that are priced way under maybe what we want to buy. You know, if there's properties like that. So if we see a bunch of junk land that is valued at $1,500 according to the county assessed value, we may ignore all of that because we're looking for the properties that the county is assessing at least $20,000 or $30,000 or $40,000, and so we'll ignore the junk property, which we'll find will be within a certain range of value. So it'll be we'll find that most of the junk property on the list might be, you know, between, you know, the lower amounts up to.
And it's going to depend on the county.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, some counties don't even have junk property.
Yeah, yeah, and really, what the quick glance method is just a way of looking at the list. You know, you're looking at the minimum bid amount. You're looking at the property address. If there's assessed value on the list, then you can automatically do in your head, at least to a degree, a bid to value ratio.
Yeah.
So, you know, and that's something that's being included, especially with online lists and that kind of information. A lot of them never going to have the assessed value. So as you're scanning that list, you can automatically see, okay, well, that's a $10,000 opening bid and the property's $100,000. Well, that's a 10% bid to value ratio. Mm-hmm. That's a property I want to research.
Yeah, yeah. You could, if you've got an assessed value and what's owed on it, you can start to narrow your selection just by looking at the bid to value ratios on the properties and trying to target those that have a good bid to value ratio. Because what you're really identifying there are healthy properties that they're delinquent on their taxes, but they've not been sitting over a long period of time accumulating a lot of additional taxes because nobody bought them. It basically means that they're in the process of going through the tax sale, you know, for the first time. And so, you know, I think you can find some great properties there. You want to obviously find the properties that have the best value versus, you know, what you're going to spend for them. You want to get the most bang for your buck is kind of the easiest way to say that. And so, you know, you're narrowing your selection to ensure that that happens.
Yeah, and as we're looking at the tax sale list, each one of those categories is going to give us some information on it. So if it has an address or it doesn't have an address, we know this property doesn't have an address. If it does, it may have on the list if it's structured or non-structured improvement value. Mm-hmm. And so as we're looking down that list, every list is going to be different, but we're going to use what information is on that list as we scan down to determine if it's a property we want to look more into. and pull up the property records.
Yeah. So lists are all different, but if you have the ability to work off of the online list, like if the county has an online list available, then use that one by all means, because that's the most likely one to be accurate. But if a downloaded list is all you can work off of, just try to make sure that if that's what you're using for due diligence, try to make sure you get the most recent one available.
Yeah, and if you're planning on attending the auction, you're going to have that information just through going to the county website.
Yeah. So this is really kind of saying what we're going over here. You're narrowing the selection in the beginning is really all about just doing a preliminary sweep of it and not spending a lot of time. The whole idea behind narrowing your selection is to save you time. So keep that in mind, that when you're doing your initial narrowing of selection here, you shouldn't have to spend a ton of time, because you're basically just kind of going off of some basic numbers like the bid to value ratio and kind of a gut instinct on what you see with the properties, and how desirable they seem to be. If they've got use, if they've got value, you'll know because some properties will seem more appealing to you than others.
Yeah, and every list is different. You're going to have lists that have 20 properties on it, and you can research every property, no problem. You're going to have other lists that have 5,000 tax liens on it or properties. And so in that selection, you're even going to have to narrow your selection more, saying, okay, I just want to invest in tax liens from $1,000 to $2,000 or whatever it is. That way you can narrow that down even more.
Yeah, I mean, we've narrowed down some enormous lists before, and what is crazy about that is when you start trying to narrow down a list of 3,000 or 4,000, potential investments or more, in some cases, you really have to have a pretty quick system for identifying the properties that you're interested in. I mean, in some cases, there's just literally not time to go through every single property, and so you have to find the fastest way to find the best opportunities. And so, like we mentioned, the bid to value ratio is one, but it could also be special features or uses for the property. It could just be based on the property value. It could be based on a sales history or images of the property that you're able to obtain. It can be based on a lot of different things. It's really kind of up to you, because it's based on your criteria. So based on what you're after, in a property. And what you want to avoid are problems and headaches. You want properties that have significant value, that have use. You want to have properties that offer true benefits there, because you can always sell them. So with that in mind, let's talk just for a second about the difference between our tax lien due diligence and tax deed due diligence, for anybody that doesn't really know the differences.
Yeah. Well, tax lien due diligence, really, we just need to make sure the property has value and it has use. When me and Shade are looking at tax lien investing, we don't get too hung up on it. We don't do the same amount of research as we would if we're buying it, because 95% of the time we're not going to be buying it. We're going to be getting our money back, and the few properties that we do, as long as it's a good investment, we're more than happy to go through that foreclosure process. And so what we're going to be looking at is really the value of the property versus how much we're going to be paying for it. The other important part that we're going to be looking for is the tax lien roll-up. How many tax liens are on the property, and how much is that total roll-up? And if we determine that total roll-up has a good value based on the value of the property, then it's going to be a good property to purchase. So tax lien investing, really within a matter of a few minutes, 2 or 3 minutes with us, we can usually determine if it's a tax lien we want to purchase.
Yeah, we can generally do that within just a minute or two of looking at some information on it. I mean, we've done it before just off of a glance, and that would tell you just a little bit about how secure and how safe tax liens are as an investment. But a couple of things here. When we're talking about the property having having significant use and value, when it comes to tax liens, really, I think what we're looking for are properties that people wouldn't want to lose to foreclosure. Okay, so if you look at a property and think, holy cow, how is this on the tax sale list? hey, that's the kind of, that's the kind of property that you want to buy a tax lien against. And the reason for that is because, yeah, it's got a lot of value. They're not going to allow it to go to foreclosure, and it does have, it would be crazy for somebody to let it go to foreclosure. And so, yeah, you're pretty much guaranteed that the lien is going to redeem. But as far as what Steve said with the roll-up, when we're looking at the roll-up on a property, that also speaks to the overall security the tax liens offer, in that you can't transfer ownership on a property that has liens against it. Not even the county can do that. Nobody can do that without having the liens be redeemed. And so when we're talking about the roll-up, really what it means is that if you want to be able to foreclose on the property, the county's requirement is going to be that all the taxes are made current. And that is going to include the other liens that exist against the property. Those are going to have to be paid off before the county will actually be able to transfer ownership over to you. So when we're talking about roll-up, we're talking about how much is owed in total on that property in order for us to foreclose on it. And that's something we want to know before we buy, because it could have an impact on the investment. It could make a difference. If it's a high amount, we may look at it and say, we're not interested in this property because if it went to foreclosure, we wouldn't want to deal with it. But on the other hand, you might have other properties that you say, look, if this goes to foreclosure, the roll-up is small compared to what the value is. This is great. Let's do this. Nothing can go wrong.
Yeah. I mean, usually in most tax liens, if there is more than 5 tax liens or 5 delinquent years against it, unless the property has huge value, versus the cost, we're essentially going to usually ignore it.
Yeah, unless the county will take offers or something, where we don't have to pay the amount that's owed. But if it's been sitting for too long,
well, and you have 5 other tax liens that are constantly earning interest. So if it's $1,000 tax lien and there's 5 other tax liens of $1,000 on it, and we're looking at a $20,000 property, well, it may cost $6,000 or $8,000 to do the foreclosure on a property that's not going to have the value that we want to get out of it. And also, that means that other tax lien holders aren't foreclosing on it as well. And so that's kind of a red flag for us if we see a tax lien that has 5 or 6 years worth of tax liens on it. Well, none of the other lien holders have paid off the other lien holders to do the foreclosure. So that kind of gives you an indication that it may not be a bad investment.
Now, really good question here by Rod. He's wondering if the possible future taxes are something that you should include in your due diligence should it happen to foreclose. For example, in the state of New Jersey, and that's a really good point, in that you would hate to foreclose on a property somewhere and not know that they had a really high tax rate, and that they pay more there. In fact, that might be something that would lead you to invest in some places over others. But definitely, one of the things you want to research when you're pulling up records on the properties, how much they paid in taxes last year, to get an idea also, what their tax rate is. And so if you've got a property that's worth $10,000 and they had, $800 owed in taxes last year, you have to look at that and say, whoa, what's going on here? Because in most cases, you would look at something like that, and the taxes would be minuscule. Yeah, I think it's definitely something you should look at.
Usually the tax lien is going to be pretty close to, it's going to be a little bit more because of the fees than the amount of the delinquent taxes. But is he asking about like the subsequent taxes, like the additional taxes? Like once you purchase that tax lien certificate, you're going to have the option to pay the additional taxes the next year.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so in that scenario, we're always going to want to be able to purchase those additional taxes, because usually you're going to get a hit up in additional, you're going to get the highest interest rate. So like in New Jersey, once you purchase that tax lien, if the person's delinquent for the next quarter, you have the option to pay for that quarters with the taxes, and then you're going to be earning the higher interest rate on that. And and then the next quarter and the next quarter, if it's in a different state, it's going to be on a year basis. But you're going to have that chance to purchase that additional tax lien. So if you do have to foreclose, you're not going to have to already buy that tax lien.
Yeah, and something else is, while we always end up looking at how much they pay in property taxes beforehand, before we buy it, because we're just interested in what the annual taxes are. Generally, if if you can get a good deal on something, it's rare that the property taxes themselves in the area will be so high that
they're high. The property value is high.
Yeah, really, yeah, it's true. You know, if you've got high property taxes, the property value is also going to be high, and so I think it's definitely good to know just so you can plan for it in terms of future costs you might incur in owning the property. Is something you can kind of calculate in, but overall, though, it shouldn't. You know, the taxes alone that are owed on the following year shouldn't be enough to undo the deal, unless there's something wrong with it anyway.
You know, I mean, if you were going to foreclose on one of those New Jersey tax things, the real estate values are so high there that even if, you know, usually you're going to have shorter redemption periods as well, so you're only going to have 2 or 3 years worth of delinquent taxes. And so it's going to still be under 5 or 10% of the property's value.
Yeah.
And so, you know, looking at that value, yeah, the property taxes may be high the next year, but you've just got a property that's worth incredible money to sell it before you ever have to pay taxes.
Yeah, I think that is something that we look at. Is the taxes are more of a long-term issue if you want to keep property long-term, and you can decide whether you want to do that or not. You know, once you've got a property, you can decide, you know, if it's worth keeping in an area or not. And if it's profitable, it's profitable.
Yeah.
All right, now tax deed due diligence is obviously a different beast because we're dealing with the acquisition of property. And, you know, there has been a foreclosure, a judicial foreclosure that has taken place on these properties because of delinquent property taxes. And so that judicial foreclosure wipes out a lot of the different encumbrances, liens, things that might be attached to it. But beyond that, there's a lot of questions that we need to answer before we're able to really make a good choice in, you know, in buying the tax deeds. You know, we need to know the exact value of about what this thing is worth, you know, compared to what we pay for it. We've got to know what we think we can sell it for.
Oh yeah, and well, you can just even see from the bullet points how much different it is. You know, with tax deed investing, because we're not acquiring the property, but with tax deeds, you are going to be the owner. You're going to receive a deed to the property. And so really, you know, the most important thing that we always determine is price. But you're going to have a lot more things you're going to be, you know, dictating. You're going to need to understand what is your exit strategy. You know, we're going to go through and research the court records for potential liens. If it's a structured property, and that's one thing as well, is a structured property is going to take a lot more due diligence.
It's really a whole nother level above tax deeds, we could say, would be tax deeds with improvements on them or with structured property on them, because they require an additional layer of due diligence that is more hands-on. You've got to have somebody there to get images of the property, you know, so that you can get an idea of what the current condition is of the property, of what potential repairs might be needed. It's just not enough to be able to you have to know that information in real time.
Yeah, really. I mean, the breakdown between land and structure is huge, because with land, we're going to go through and we're going to determine where the property location is and the value, and we're going to do comparables to find out what other property are selling for. But we may not even visit the property. In fact, 99% of the time we don't. You know, we're going to be purchasing the property based on Google images, based on legal descriptions and the county maps, and determining exactly where that property is. Now, when it comes to a structured property, that's where we're going to have to either us ourselves or hire somebody, handyman, to go out there and take current photos for us and, you know, look for the repairs that are needed. And when we're doing the repairs, we can only judge what we can see. Mm-hmm. So some homes, if there's maybe it's vacant, you know, maybe somebody can take some photos of the inside, you know, at least through the windows or kind of. But if the property is still occupied, you know, you may just be able to take the photos essentially on the street. And so we need to be able to, you know, we're kind of judging the inside based on the outside.
Yeah. You know, as the amount you're spending increases, so does your risk. And that means that the precautions that you take to avoid those risks have got to go up. You know, when we're buying raw land, we don't have to worry about some kind of a problem with the condition of improvements or something like that. The land is pretty much just is what it is. But with tax deeds that have improvements, when you're looking at a market value for that property, it's under the assumption that that property is in good, fair market condition. You know, that it's, you know, that the condition is good. So it really can only have that value if the condition matches it. And so you've got a lot of additional risks that are there, but you also have a lot of additional rewards that are there, because with the introduction of properties with improvements or structures, you have the added ability to collect more in monthly rent, you know, to create income properties with those types of properties, and also to have much increased profit.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, you know, if you're interested in real estate, there's no better way to get started in real estate than tax sale investing. You know, in a way, I feel like I've been involved in real estate my whole life, just because my dad was a general contractor and a home builder, and you know, my first profession was as a real estate agent. And soon after that, me and Shay got started in tax sale investing. And so we've, you know, been involved with investing in different types of investment strategies within the seminar companies we've worked at for 20 years. And there's nothing that's better than tax sale investing. It's the reason we preach it. It's the reason we have been doing it the entire time, because there's not a better way to acquire real estate.
No, it's the best kept secret, really. You know, and what's nice about it is that even if you tell people about it, they're not going to figure it out. You know, because to really figure out how it works is going to take some time and some dedication, as you're all figuring out here. You know, there is some time and work that goes into it. But hey, at the same time, though, what other way can you find to buy property for 10% of what it's worth? It just doesn't exist. And so
yeah, it's going to take work. You know, I mean, in fact, you know, we can even just see the results of somebody who's working hard at it. One of our coaching students, Michael, you know, each week you can see his knowledge is gaining as he's going through and now finding properties and evaluating, giving us to say, hey, what do you think about these? And he's already done that research, and he's already been able to go through just over, you know, so many weeks to be able to identify, these are the properties that I want. These are the properties I want to avoid. You know, here's what my concern is. Here's, you know.
Yeah, Michael's in the zone.
And so essentially it just takes work. But once you have gone through that process and put in the work, then it becomes so much easier. You know, what took you a long time to go through and research a list, you can do it in a shorter period of time.
Yeah, you'll only get faster at it. And so, you know, some of the other things on this, you know, comps, make sure you do comps. Look at some of the past stuff we've done on that, title reports on the properties with improvements. You know, there's a lot of things that will go into calculating what your max bid, but again, that's tax deeds. You know, there's a lot more questions with tax deeds because there's greater potential profit and you know, and greater potential risk, you know, at the same time. So, you know, we do love tax deeds though, and the way they work. So, and liens as well. Well, I think we've made this a little bit long here. We'll go ahead and close it down here for the night. Please let us know though if you've got any questions or if any of you have any interest in finding out more about the mentoring. Let us know. We're happy to do it.
You guys have a great week. We'll look forward to talking to you next week.
We'll see you.